My family laughed at my $6 hoodie until they found out why I wore it when I walked into the boardroom. As the CEO of a $20 million company, if you've ever walked into a room and instantly known you didn't belong, not because of anything you did, but because of the way people looked at you like you were an uninvited guest at your own life, then you'll understand exactly how I felt that night. My name's Chase. I'm 33, and I'm the guy who showed up to his little sister's engagement party wearing a $6 hoodie and catching side eyes like I just tracked mud across a white carpet. But let me rewind a bit because this story doesn't start at the party. It starts with a family that forgot who I was and a fiancé who really should have kept his mouth shut. I was always the quiet one in the family, not shy, just observant. I learned early that when you have two parents who value appearances more than substance and a younger sister who could do no wrong, it's easier to keep your head down and work on your own goals than fight for attention that always feels conditional. My parents, Deborah and Alan, weren't bad people per se, just deeply invested in what other people thought. To them, success looked like Instagram perfect vacations, curated brunches, and polite kids with private school educations. So when I told them I wasn't going to college, but instead wanted to work on a little tech startup I was building in my room, they patted me on the shoulder and said, "It's good to dream, Chase. Just make sure you're being realistic." That was over a decade ago. Fast forward to now, and they still think I'm a little lost, maybe even a bit pitiful. That's partly my fault. I stopped trying to explain what I do years ago. I never corrected their assumptions that I was freelancing or figuring it out. I let them believe I lived in a modest shared apartment downtown because I couldn't afford better when the truth was I owned the building. I didn't drive a flashy car. I didn't wear designer clothes. I didn't flash money at family events. Why would I? I wasn't trying to prove anything. Or maybe deep down, I just wanted to see who they were when they thought I had nothing. My sister Ivy is the golden child. Always has been. If I brought home a B+ in high school, it was Chase, you can do better. If she got a B-, it was, well, that subject's just not her strength. She's 4 years younger than me and has the kind of personality that draws people in, bubbly, fashionable, and just oblivious enough to get away with saying things that would sound arrogant coming from anyone else. I don't dislike Ivy, not really, but she's never truly seen me. She talks at me, not to me. And lately, ever since she got engaged to this guy named Logan, it's like the distance between us has turned into a canyon. Logan is something else. Picture every finance bro stereotype you've ever seen rolled into one tall, smug package. Perfect hair, fake laugh, and a handshake that's just a little too firm, like he's trying to assert dominance during brunch. We've only met a handful of times, and every interaction ends with me feeling like I need a shower. The first time we met, he looked me up and down like I was a delivery guy who accidentally wandered into the dining room. He asked what I do for fun with that polite edge people use when they don't really care about your answer. When Ivy chimed in with, "Chase is still working on his app stuff," Logan's eyebrows raised slightly, and he nodded like I was a high schooler learning to code on weekends. I didn't correct her or him, so when I got the invitation to Ivy's engagement party, I knew what to expect. It wasn't really for me, it was for show. Ivy and Logan were throwing it at a vineyard just outside the city, one of those places with white tablecloths and fairy lights wrapped around olive trees. The invite said, "Cocktail attire," which in my family means spend at least $300 or risk being talked about behind your back. I showed up in jeans, sneakers, and that $6 hoodie I picked up on sale as a joke. Not to make a statement, not to rebel just because I felt like it. And maybe, yeah, a little part of me wanted to see what would happen. The moment I stepped into the main courtyard, I felt it. Heads turned, conversations slowed. My mom blinked twice when she saw me, then forced a tight smile like she was bracing herself for someone else to notice. My dad gave me a nod from across the patio, then quickly resumed laughing with a group of Logan's uncles. But it was Logan who sealed the moment. He strolled over, wineglass in hand, his suit perfectly tailored like he'd been dipped in money. He looked me up and down again with that scanning gaze and grinned. "Did you Uber here, Chase?" he asked loud enough that two of Ivy's friends turned their heads. I smiled, nodded once, and shrugged. Something like that. He chuckled, the kind of laugh that's meant to be shared like a joke at someone's expense. "Well, hey, good to see you, man. Ivy will be thrilled you made it." Then he gave me a pat on the shoulder like he was being generous with his time and sauntered off. I stood there for a moment, just taking it in. The way everyone around me looked so polished, so performative. Ivy's friends were posing for group selfies. My mom was explaining the food to someone like she'd planned the menu herself. And there I was, the brother in the cheap hoodie with wine I didn't really want in a place I didn't feel welcome. But I didn't leave. I stayed. I made small talk. I smiled when people asked about my work and let them fill in the blanks with whatever assumptions they wanted. I let my aunt suggest that maybe I could help out with Ivy's wedding website since I'm so good with computers. I didn't correct her either, not that night, because I knew something no one else in that courtyard knew. Something Logan, with his smirk and condescending tone, was about to find out in the most delicious way possible. The next morning, Logan had a board meeting scheduled downtown. I knew this because I'd seen the calendar not from snooping or spying, but because his firm had just signed a 5-year lease on the 27th floor of a building I owned, a building I'd personally purchased through a holding company 3 years ago. And tomorrow I was going to be sitting at the head of that conference table, not as a guest, not as a silent investor, but as the founder of the tech firm that had just acquired a 35% stake in his company's latest venture. But of course, he didn't know that yet. And that made what came next all the more satisfying. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was upset, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying the way Logan said it. "Did you Uber here?" The tone was so casual, so harmless on the surface, but underneath it was a jab, a public jab, a subtle way of telling everyone, hey, this guy doesn't belong here. And what made it worse wasn't that he said it, but that nobody around me blinked. No one stepped in, not even Ivy. She was too busy soaking up the attention fluttering between wine tables and hugging people she hadn't seen since college. But that's always how it's been. Ivy shines, and everyone else fades into the background, even me. I got back to my place around midnight, sat on the edge of my bed, and pulled off my sneakers. I live in the top floor unit of a restored pre-war building in the heart of the city. Hardwood floors, exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows. Not that my family knows that. Far as they're concerned, I'm still renting a cramped walk-up with roommates and mismatched furniture. I don't show off not because I'm humble. I just learned a long time ago that flaunting things only fuels their weird mix of judgment and jealousy. Still, as I looked out across the skyline that night, I felt something in my chest. Not quite anger, not quite sadness either. More like a deep ache. I'd built a life for myself that I was proud of, quietly, deliberately. And yet here I was feeling like a teenager all over again, like the kid who didn't get invited to prom, only to find out later that his sister helped plan it. The morning came too fast. I put on a clean white button-down navy blazer and tailored slacks. Nothing flashy, just sharp enough to command attention in a boardroom. I don't wear watches, but I slipped on the silver one my old co-founder got me when we hit our first million in revenue. It still ticks like the day he gave it to me. By 8:15, I was pulling into the underground garage of the commercial tower my real estate firm manages. The 27th floor had just been renovated, glass-walled conference rooms, soundproof pods, a lobby, barista station. Logan's company, Virion Capital, had moved in last month. The deal had been brokered by one of my holding companies, and my name never showed up on a single piece of paper. That's how I like it. Quiet leverage. I took the elevator to the executive conference room and greeted my assistant, Rachel, who had already prepped the room with coffee printouts and name cards. I wasn't just attending today, I was leading it. My software firm had recently partnered with Virion's new venture, a fintech platform that needed the tech infrastructure we had already built. The meeting was set to finalize a roadmap and discuss equity structuring. Logan had no idea. As the room started to fill up with suits and interns carrying tablets, I took a seat at the head of the table and sipped my coffee. Calm, steady, focused. At 9:03, Logan strolled in with his usual swagger. He was mid-laugh with one of his analysts not even glancing toward the head of the table until he did. And then he froze. I didn't say anything, just gave him a polite nod, watched the confusion flicker across his face like a power outage. You could almost hear the mental gears grinding as he processed what he was seeing. He opened his mouth like he was about to say something, then closed it again. Slowly, he found his seat at the side of the table. The energy in the room shifted ever so slightly, but I'll come back to that later, because that moment, that was just the start. The days leading up to that meeting were what really told me where I stood with my family. Let me rewind. After the engagement party, I figured I'd give Ivy a call just to check in, not because I too, but because I felt like I should. I hadn't seen her much since she started dating Logan, and even less since they got engaged. The last real conversation we had was months ago when I offered to help with the wedding planning, maybe cover some of the tech or booking logistics. She smiled and said, "That's sweet, but Logan has it all under control." So I called her the next day. She didn't pick up, sent a text 20 minutes later. "Hey, busy with tasting menu today. So fun last night, though." No follow-up, no thanks for coming, no sorry about Logan being a tool, just 3 exclamation marks and 2 heart emojis. That's when the messages from Mom started rolling in. "Chase, I hope you understand that Logan's humor just takes some getting used to. Don't be too sensitive. It was cocktail attire, sweetie. Maybe next time wear a sport coat. Ivy said you seemed a little distant. Try to be more engaged next time. It's her special moment. Each message felt like a little push, not over it, just nudging me back in line. Like I was the one who had embarrassed the family. Like Logan was some kind of social barometer I had failed to meet. And then came the big one. A week after the party, I got an email from my dad. Not a call, an email. Subject line, financial assistance for Ivy's wedding. It was addressed to me, Ivy, my parents, and 2 aunts. The body of the message read like a proposal, literally. There were bullet points, a spreadsheet attached. My dad had outlined a funding plan for the wedding expenses totaling just under $180,000. Venue catering, custom invitations, luxury transportation for the guests, a live jazz band, and a destination honeymoon. He was asking each family unit to contribute, including me. Now look, I'm not stingy. I've helped people out. I've paid for hospital bills. Tuition even helped a buddy get his bakery off the ground. But this felt different. It wasn't an ask. It was an expectation. No one had spoken to me about it beforehand. No one asked if I could contribute. Just assumed I'd be fine covering my share. $130,000. I stared at the email for a long time, and then I did something I hadn't done in years. I replied, "Hi all, appreciate you putting this together. A few thoughts. I wasn't aware Ivy's wedding had turned into a group-funded venture. I haven't been involved in any part of the planning and wasn't consulted about this request. I'd be happy to support in a way that feels appropriate and respectful, but $30,000 without prior discussion, isn't it? If Ivy and Logan want a wedding of this scale, perhaps they should also be contributing proportionately. Best Chase." Within hours, I got a phone call from Mom. "Chase," she said, already exasperated. "Why did you write that email?" "Because I meant it," I said flatly. "You made us all look bad, like we're trying to bleed you dry." "Are you not?" I asked. She sighed. "This is Ivy's big moment. She deserves the best." "So did I said quietly. But I didn't get a dime when I launched my company, or when I moved into my first place, or when I had to choose between eating dinner or paying rent." "That was different," she said. "Why? Because you wanted to take the hard route. Ivy's doing things the right way." I didn't respond. There wasn't much to say to that. We ended the call shortly after, but I could feel the ice forming beneath the surface. Later that night, Ivy texted me, not to apologize, not to ask how I was, just this: "Can you at least try to be supportive? It's not all about you, Chase." That one hit different. Not because it was harsh, but because it showed just how far gone she was. I didn't reply. Instead, I started making calls, quiet ones, to the legal team, to my operations lead, to the people I trust most, because if they were going to treat me like a nobody, like some hoodie-wearing outsider who didn't deserve a seat at the table, I was going to remind them that I built the table. But before I could even begin to implement what I was planning, something happened that pushed everything over the edge. Something that changed the dynamic in a way none of them could walk back from. And it all started with a dinner invitation from Logan. Logan's text came 2 days after the email debacle. It was short, casual, almost too casual. "Hey man, let's grab dinner this week. Just us, my treat." At first I thought it was a mistake. Maybe he meant to send it to someone else. Or maybe Ivy or my parents had gotten in his ear and told him to smooth things over. Either way, it felt off. But part of me, some naive, buried part, thought maybe he was trying. Maybe, just maybe, he wanted to extend an olive branch or at least clear the air before the wedding planning became a full-blown Cold War. So I said yes. He picked the place, this swanky, new-age steakhouse downtown with dark lighting, $50 appetizers and menus printed on black matte cardstock. You know the type. The kind of place that doesn't put prices next to the Wagyu and the waiter acts like you're beneath him if you don't order the chef's tasting menu. I got there 10 minutes early. Logan rolled in 20 minutes late. No apology, just a casual traffic man. You know how it is. He was already on the phone when he sat down laughing with someone named Carter about some deal going sideways because of a clause in the term sheet. No acknowledgement, no greeting, just plopped into the booth and kept yapping like I was his assistant and not his guest. Eventually, he hung up and leaned back, loosening his collar like the conversation had exhausted him. "So," he said, flashing that same rehearsed grin he wore at the engagement party. "Thanks for meeting. I know things have been weird." Weird. That was one way to put it. I didn't say much, just nodded and let him talk. "You know how families are," he continued. Drama egos, old stuff bubbling up. But Ivy really wants this whole thing to go smoothly, and your mom's been a little stressed. Has she? I said flat. He paused, studied me for a second. Look, man, I get it. You're the older brother, and maybe you feel a little sidelined right now. I blinked. Sidelined? Yeah. I mean, you've always kind of done your own thing, right? Not super involved, kind of off the grid, which is cool, dude, seriously. But when it comes to big events like this, people notice. I felt something tighten in my jaw. People notice a lot of things. He smiled like I just made his point for him. I just think, he said, leaning in, conspiratorially, maybe you could, be a little more mindful of how you show up, that hoodie at the party. Come on, man. You had to know that wasn't a great look. I stared at him. I didn't realize it was a job interview. He laughed. No, but think of it from Ivy's perspective. Everyone's looking at photos, sharing them on socials, and then there's your hoodie in the background. It just didn't match the vibe. I wanted to walk out right then and there, but I didn't. I waited, let him keep digging. Ivy said you're not really helping out with the wedding, he added, swirling his whiskey. And that's fine. I know you've got your own stuff going on, but she's your sister. You only get married once. I arched an eyebrow. Do you? He smirked. Hopefully. Then just as the waiter came to take our order, Logan said something that flipped the entire night on its head. Oh, and by the way, he said, waving off the menu without even looking at it. I had a little chat with your dad about the wedding fun stuff. Figured I'd offer a suggestion. I set my menu down. What kind of suggestion? He sipped his drink, then said, told him I'd be willing to cover your share of the expenses, like as a gesture, clean slate and all, so you don't have to worry about the 30 grand. I stared at him. Excuse me, he grinned. Yeah, I know things have been tight for you. Ivy mentioned you're still freelancing and kind of between gigs, and I figured why make this harder than it has to be. It's just money. No big deal. There it was. Ivy told him I was broke. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. You offered to pay my share, I said slowly. Yeah, he said like he was proud of it. Look, I know it might bruise your ego a little, but at the end of the day, it's just family. No need to make a scene over a few dollars. 30,000. Covered by the man who smirked at me like I was a delivery guy. The man who assumed I Ubered to the engagement party because clearly someone like me couldn't afford anything nicer. I forced myself to stay calm. I smiled. Not because I was okay, but because I realized something important in that moment. They didn't just underestimate me, they had erased me. My own sister let her fiancé believe I was struggling. My parents went along with it. No one corrected the lie because it was more convenient to keep me small, easy, forgettable. I could have blown up right then, could have told Logan that I owned the building his company just moved into, that I held a controlling interest in the tech his firm was about to depend on, that his entire world was about to shift and he didn't even see it coming. But I didn't, because the betrayal wasn't just what he said, it was what Ivy didn't. After dinner, I didn't hear from her for a week. No call, no text, nothing. So I called her. When she picked up, she sounded distracted. Hey, can I call you back in the middle of finalizing the flower arrangements? I won't take long, I said. Just one question. Okay, did you tell Logan I was broke? There was a pause, then a sigh. Chase, come on. Did you? I didn't say broke. I just said you've been figuring things out. Figuring things out, I repeated. Aren't you? I clenched the phone tighter. Why would you say that? Why would you let him think I can't afford to contribute? I didn't let him think anything, she snapped. It's not like you've been super transparent. You don't even talk about what you do. That doesn't mean you get to fill in the blanks with whatever makes your life more convenient. Her voice went cold. You're being dramatic. I laughed. You're marrying a guy who offered to pay my share of your wedding and acted like it was charity. And you let him. He was trying to be nice. No, he was trying to assert control, and you let him do it at my expense. She didn't answer. That hurts, Ivy, I said. It really does. Well, maybe if you showed up for this family once in a while, people wouldn't have to assume anything. Click. That was it. She hung up on me. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel left out. I didn't even feel angry. I felt done. But the betrayal wasn't finished yet. Not even close. 3 days later, I got an email from the wedding planner, a mass message to everyone involved in the event. The subject line made my stomach sink. Final guest roles and rehearsal dinner itinerary. Attached was a PDF with all the updated wedding details. Seating charts, schedules, rolls, photos, notes from Ivy, and pink highlighter. I opened the file, scanned the first few pages, and then froze. Under wedding party, my name wasn't listed. I wasn't a groomsman. I wasn't doing a toast. I wasn't even seated at the family table. I'd been demoted to general guest seating, table 17, right between college friends of the bride and neighbors of the groom's parents. No call, no explanation, no heads up, just quietly, efficiently removed. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. They wanted me invisible. And that's when something shifted. Something deep. Something final. I wasn't going to play along anymore. I wasn't going to pretend this was normal or healthy or deserved. They had erased me from their perfect little narrative. They had rewritten who I was to fit their version of the story. And now it was time to write my own ending. But before I could begin, something else happened. Something that changed everything. It started with a phone call from one of Logan's partners. And what? He told me it flipped the entire game on its head. The phone rang just after 7 a.m. I was sitting on the patio of my place, coffee in hand, watching the city start its day through a veil of early morning haze. My mind was still spinning from that PDF. The table assignment. The way my name was buried like an afterthought. As if I were just some distant cousin they had to invite out of obligation. I hadn't spoken to Ivy since the call. I hadn't responded to the wedding planner. I hadn't told anyone in the family how much that little spreadsheet gutted me. I just sat with it, let it settle, let the silence thicken. Then came the call. Chase Everett. The voice said smooth but cautious. "This is Chase. It's Daniel from Vitech Partners. Logan passed me your contact. Said you'd be the point person on the DevOps licensing questions. That made me sit up a little straighter. DevOps licensing, Vitech. That was the back-end infrastructure deal. Logan's firm was finalizing for the fintech platform they were building. And it wasn't supposed to be public knowledge that I had any direct line to those licensing conversations. At least not yet. Sure, I said, measured. How can I help? Daniel hesitated for half a second, like he was unsure how much to say. So look, I'll just be upfront. We've been reviewing the equity splits Logan proposed last week, and there's some stuff that's not lining up. There's a clause in the joint venture agreement that names your firm as a key partner. But Logan presented it like it was a third-party vendor. External only. I frowned. That's not how it was structured. Yeah, he said quickly. That's what I figured. And then I saw the name of the holding company, Thorne and Kessler Group, and I recognized it from a different file. That's yours, right? He had done his homework. Yes, I said calmly. It is. There was a pause. Okay, so here's the thing. Logan tried to rework the contract to cut your team out of profit sharing entirely, recast you as vendors instead of strategic partners. He claimed you missed your development deadlines and voided the clause. I blinked. That clause was never voided, and we hadn't missed a single deadline. I knew because I built the schedule. Personally, it was a lie. A paper-thin, easily refutable lie, but a lie all the same. Thanks for letting me know, I said, voice tight. I'll handle it. Daniel lowered his voice. Just be careful. I don't think he realizes who you are yet. I ended the call and stared at the skyline for a long time. The coffee in my hand had gone cold. My heart hadn't. So this is what betrayal looks like in a suit and tie. Not just humiliation at a dinner table. Not just manipulation of family dynamics. This was professional, strategic, deliberate. Logan was trying to erase me in more ways than one. First at the engagement party, then in front of my own family. And now he was trying to cut me out of a deal I architected from the ground up, using my own infrastructure, my own code base, and my own money. And Ivy, she was letting him. Worse, maybe she knew. That's when I hit bottom. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just a slow, suffocating realization that I didn't have a sister anymore. Not really. She'd chosen someone else. Over and over, again. She traded her brother for a polished resume and a family with connections. And I'd let her do it. I'd given her space, grace, every benefit of the doubt. I'd forgiven her for being thoughtless, for being passive, for going along with a narrative that made me the family underachiever. But this wasn't passive anymore. This was a betrayal clear as day. And for the first time, I let myself feel it, fully. I didn't eat that day. Couldn't. I left my phone on silent and let the texts pile up. Mom sent a link to the Airbnb she wanted me to book near the wedding venue. Cheaper than the hotel, but still decent. If that's more your style. Ivy sent a group photo from her cake tasting with the caption, "Missing you." Logan. God help me sent a meme about groomsmen tuxes being too tight. I deleted it before I even finished reading. I felt like I was drifting. My world, the one I had built so carefully with late nights and tenacity and 1,000 uncelebrated wins, suddenly felt far away, like it didn't matter, because the people I wanted to be proud of me never even noticed. That night, I walked 5 miles with no destination. Just wandered downtown in a hoodie and sneakers, the same kind that got me mocked. I passed restaurants I'd invested in anonymously, bars that used my software to manage tabs, buildings that stood tall because I wrote the code that made their systems run, and not one person knew. And maybe that was the point, because I never wanted the spotlight. I just wanted to be respected, seen, understood. Instead, I was misunderstood by strangers and dismissed by my own blood. When I got home, the lights from the city pulsed like a heartbeat through the glass. I collapsed into the chair in the corner of my living room, the one no one ever sat in but me, and I stared into the dark for hours. Something broke that night, quietly. No rage, no slamming fists or shattering glass, just silence and a decision. I wasn't going to fight for their approval anymore. I wasn't going to show up and smile through the disrespect. I wasn't going to pour myself into people who only saw me when I was useful or convenient. But I wasn't going to get revenge either. Not yet. Because revenge implies reacting, and I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. That's when I pulled out the old leather-bound notebook from the bottom drawer of my desk, the one I hadn't touched since my second startup exit. Inside were sketches, diagrams, contingency ideas, notes I wrote to myself in moments of clarity. I flipped past pages and landed on a blank one. I wrote one word at the top, reset, then underlined it, and I started to write ideas, steps, levers I could pull. Not to destroy, but to remind. Because sometimes the best way to handle betrayal isn't to burn the house down. It's to own it without anyone realizing. And the first domino, the one that would shift everything, was an invitation. An invitation I wasn't supposed to see. One that wasn't sent to me directly. But I saw it anyway. Because Rachel, my assistant, who reads everything, forwarded it to my inbox that morning, with a subject line that simply said, "You'll want to see this." It was a calendar hold for an executive brunch, a private high-level event hosted by Logan's firm, Virion Capital, designed to woo a set of angel investors and showcase their new fintech prototype, set to take place in 2 weeks, at a venue I happen to own. I read the invitation twice, then leaned back in my chair, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Not because I was plotting, not yet, but because the pieces were finally on the board. And this time I wasn't playing defense. I didn't start making moves right away. That's not how you build something that lasts. You don't win the game by flipping the board. You win by rearranging the pieces so slowly, so quietly, that by the time your opponent realizes what you're doing, they're already in checkmate. And after what they did after Ivy cut me out of the wedding, like I was a placeholder instead of a person, after Logan tried to erase me from a deal I created after Mom had the gall to send me a budget Airbnb link like I was some broke cousin scraping together change just to show up, I wasn't just playing for a win. I was building an empire they couldn't ignore. It started small, not flashy, just a series of quiet conversations. I met with my legal team, not to sue anyone, not yet, just to review the terms of the Vitech partnership and make sure every clause, especially the ones involving revenue sharing and tech licensing, was airtight. I had structured the deal through a separate holding company years ago, partially to shield my name, partially because I liked staying in the shadows. But now I needed to bring things into the light. Then I called my DevOps team into an emergency sync, told them to double encrypt all the back-end architecture change, administrative access points, and re-verify every update made in the last 30 days. Logan had already tried to push us out once. I wouldn't give him the chance to do it again. From there, I reached out to a few friends in venture capital. Not to raise money, but to plant seeds, subtle ones. I knew Logan's firm had been shopping their prototype around to a few angel funds. What he didn't know was that 2 of those funds were run by people I'd mentored 5 years ago when they were still building pitch decks in coffee shops. I didn't tell them to blacklist him. I didn't have to. All I did was explain calmly and clearly how the foundation of the project was built on infrastructure I owned and how Logan had tried to cut me out without cause. That was all they needed to hear. See, in tech, reputation spreads faster than code. And while Logan looked good in a suit, VCs care about execution. They care about who built the thing, not just who pitched it, and I built the thing. At the same time, I started showing up again. Not at family events, not yet, but in public. At fundraisers, tech summits, startup mixers, places I used to avoid because I didn't care about clout. Now I had a reason to care. Not for me, for optics. People began whispering, is that Chase Everett? I thought he dropped off the map. Didn't he build that predictive engine for Sequoia's portfolio modeling? I heard he owns half the valley and just doesn't talk about it. I didn't correct anyone. Let them wonder. Let the silence work for me. My personal life started to shift too. I hired a stylist. Not to look flashy, just refined. Bought 2 new suits that actually fit like armor. Upgraded my car to a matte black Audi e-tron. Sleek, silent. Unmistakably expensive, but only if you knew what you were looking at. Like me. I moved into the penthouse unit of my building. No announcement, no look at me moment. Just quietly handed the keys to the tenant below and took the top floor. I redecorated with clean lines, dark wood, and soft lighting. Hung one piece of art, a sketch of an empty throne on the main wall. A gift from an old friend who once told me, "You don't need a crown if you own the castle." Every morning I worked out with a private trainer. Not to get ripped, just strong, steady, focused. Every afternoon I met with Rachel and my strategy team to revise our roadmap. We were scaling, fast. And the fintech project that Logan thought he could sideline me from, it was just one of 5 deals I had spinning now. One of 5 chessboards. He was stuck on his rook. I was already 3 moves away from queening a pawn. And then 1 week before the executive brunch, Logan was hosting the one he had booked in my building without realizing who signed the lease. I got a text from Ivy. "Hey, haven't heard from you in a bit. Can we talk?" It was like a ghost reaching out through the fog. I stared at the screen for a long time. We hadn't spoken since the fight. Since the "you're being dramatic" phone call. Since I found my name buried under table 17 next to a bunch of people I'd never met. But I didn't ignore her. I said simply, "Sure. When?" She responded almost immediately. "Come by Mom and Dad's tomorrow. Just for a bit. No drama. Promise." I agreed. Not because I missed her. Not because I thought she deserved it. But because I needed to know. I needed to hear it from her mouth whether she really understood what she'd done or if she was just trying to smooth things over before the wedding. I drove to my parents' place the next evening, wearing the same hoodie from the engagement party. Let them see the version of me they thought they knew. Ivy was already there. Sitting on the patio with a glass of wine, legs crossed, staring at the sky like she was trying to remember how to be soft again. "Hey," she said as I stepped out. "Hey." We sat in silence for a moment. The air smelled like rosemary and grilled chicken, probably something Mom was cooking inside for Logan and his parents. "I messed up," Ivy said finally. I didn't respond. She looked over. "You don't have to forgive me. I just want you to know I've been thinking about everything." "Have you?" "Yes. And I realized I let people speak for you. I let Logan make assumptions. I let Mom and Dad shape the narrative. And I didn't push back." I looked at her. "Why?" She hesitated. "Because it was easier." There it was. The truth, she continued. "Logan's world is very curated. Everyone in it plays a part. I thought if I just slotted you in quietly, didn't make noise, things would go smoother. You made me invisible." "I know. You wanted me invisible." "No," she said quickly. "I just didn't know how to explain you, what you do. You've always been this mystery, and I thought if you just played along, it would be fine." "It wasn't fine." She nodded. "I see that now." We sat with that for a long time. "I don't need an apology," I said eventually. "I just need to know if this is who you are now. If you're okay marrying someone who lies about deals and treats people like props." She flinched. "What happened between you two?" "Isn't personal," I cut in. "It's professional, and it was a move, a calculated one. He knew what he was doing." She looked away, and in that moment I knew. She wasn't ready to confront it. Not fully, not yet, and that was fine. Because I was done, waiting for her to catch up. As I stood to leave, she said quietly, "You're not coming to the wedding, are you?" I turned back. "I haven't decided." Her eyes searched mine. "If you don't come, people will notice. Let them." And then I left. The next morning, Rachel sent me the final guest list for the executive brunch Logan was hosting. His name was printed right under the words, "Hosted by Thorne and Kessler in partnership with Everett Tech." It was the first time Logan would see my name on the paperwork. It wouldn't be the last. Because while he was still busy managing impressions and playing house with a family that applauded appearances, I was rewriting the power structure beneath his feet. And the next time we met, it wouldn't be at a dinner table. It would be at a boardroom. And I would be at the head. But that confrontation, that moment where everything would come crashing down, that was still to come. And when it did, it would change everything. I didn't sleep much the night before the brunch. Not because I was nervous, because I was wide awake, alert, focused. Every gear in my mind turning with quiet precision. This wasn't revenge yet, not the satisfying kind. But I was setting the stage. And what I was about to learn in the next 48 hours would shift everything into high gear. See, there's a difference between having power and knowing when to use it. I'd spent years collecting leverage. But now I was finally starting to understand just how much I had and how blind Logan was to it. The executive brunch was scheduled for 10 a.m. at one of those sleek rooftop lounges with panoramic views of the skyline and furniture so modern it looked uncomfortable. Logan had chosen it months ago, thought he was being clever, thought the exposed brick and artisanal coffee carts would impress the angel investors. What he didn't realize was that the entire venue, top to bottom, was part of a property I'd acquired quietly last year through a shell company. I didn't announce it. I just sent a quick email to the venue director the day before. Please be advised that I'll be attending the brunch event at 10 a.m. tomorrow as a representative of the parent company. Full access requested. No need to inform the client. The reply came 10 minutes later. Understood, Mr. Everett. All access granted. Staff briefed accordingly. Perfect. The morning of the event, I dressed simply. Charcoal jacket, black shirt, no tie. Professional but understated. The kind of look that made people wonder, who is that? Even if they didn't recognize you right away. I walked into the venue 30 minutes early and shook hands with the general manager, toured the space, made small talk with the barista, confirmed which executive guests had RSVP'd. And that's when I saw it, the guest list. Typed, printed, taped to the back of the podium where Logan was set to give his speech. And halfway down the list under VIP investor, confirmed attendance was a name I hadn't seen in years. Peter Calhoun, my old mentor. The first man who believed in me when I was still pitching prototype apps on my cracked MacBook in a shared workspace. He'd once run one of the most respected fintech firms in the Bay, retired at 45, moved to Spain, disappeared from the startup, scene completely. And now he was here. And not just attending. He was listed as the primary funder for Logan's new platform, which meant Logan had no idea who he was dealing with. I stood there for a second, stunned. Then I did something impulsive. I pulled out my phone and texted Peter. Didn't know you were in town. We need to talk before Logan starts pitching you lies. I didn't expect a reply, but 5 minutes later I got one. On the roof deck, 10 minutes. We met where the wind could cut through your thoughts. Sunlight danced off glass towers around us, but Peter stood in the shade, hands in his pockets, wearing a tan blazer and sunglasses that made him look like a professor on sabbatical. He hadn't aged a day. Chase Everett, he said, turning. Of all the ghosts in this city. I smiled. Didn't expect to find you funding a guy like Logan. Peter raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect to find you in his shadow. I'm not, said calmly. I'm the scaffolding holding up the building he thinks he built. Peter chuckled. That sounds more like the Chase I remember. I filled him in quietly, carefully on everything. The infrastructure, the licensing, the attempted, cut out the fake deadlines. I showed him emails, documents, Slack screenshots. The truth layered and undeniable. He didn't interrupt, didn't blink. When I was done, he just nodded slowly and said, Then I guess we have a problem. Not if we solve it before he opens his mouth. Peter leaned on the railing and looked out across the city. You know I didn't want to come back. I retired for a reason, but this deal was supposed to be clean, simple. He pitched me vision numbers, promised your platform was just plug and play. It's not, I said. It's proprietary and protected, and you own it. All of it. Peter nodded, then smiled. Then it's time we reminded everyone in that room who they're really doing business with. He didn't say more. He didn't have to. The brunch began at 10:02 a.m. sharp. I didn't enter until 10:20, right in the middle of Logan's opening remarks. And that's why this next phase is so crucial. He was saying, pacing the stage in a fitted blazer like he was auditioning for a TED Talk. With the new DevOps framework, our platform can scale 10 times in the next 12 months. Then he saw me. I walked in without breaking. Stride headed straight to the back and leaned against the wall, just watching. Logan's voice faltered for a split second. Only someone paying very close attention would have caught it. And with our infrastructure partner, we've ensured 24/7 uptime without compromising latency. His eyes flicked to Peter, who gave nothing away. And then to my satisfaction, Logan sweated. Not visibly, not like a cartoon villain melting under the truth, but subtly, the way. His posture stiffened, the way his hands clenched just a little too tight on the remote, the way his voice raised a half octave when he started describing the tech he didn't actually understand. I'll let him finish. And when the polite applause died down, Peter stood. Before we break for coffee, he said casually, there's someone else in the room you all need to meet. Every head turned. Logan froze. This is Chase Everett, Peter continued. He's the architect of the infrastructure we just heard about. And full transparency, he's the reason I'm here today. Guests are rare in investor rooms, but there were a few. Logan tried to recover. Right. Yes, he's on the technical side consulting, mostly very behind the scenes. I smiled. Actually, I said, stepping forward, I own the infrastructure and I'm not consulting. I'm partnering through Everett Tech, which your firm failed to disclose in its investor briefings. Silence. I let it sit for just a beat longer. Don't worry, I said, addressing the room. We've resolved the paperwork issues. Going forward, all technical inquiries should come directly to my team. We're happy to share the roadmap and access pipeline, but only with full equity protection. Peter nodded once. Agreed. I turned to Logan. Nice venue, by the way. I love what you've done with the place. His face paled. You. I own it. I said simply, through one of the holdings you tried to write out of the contract. The room shifted, not dramatically, but perceptibly. Eyes turned, minds recalculated. Logan tried to laugh it off. Look, there's clearly been some confusion. No confusion, Peter cut in, just correction. Logan floundered. We should talk privately. Already did, Peter said, then added, we're restructuring. The brunch ended shortly after that. Not abruptly, not messily, just quietly, like a spell being broken. People whispered, cards were exchanged, hands were shaken, but no one looked at Logan the same way again. He'd brought them all here to see a king. Instead, they found the man who built the castle. And the king, he was already on the throne. But this wasn't the end. It wasn't even revenge yet. Because while Logan had just lost face, I had just found the weak link. That night, Rachel forwarded me a confidential draft email, a resignation letter from one of Logan's closest partners. And the reason he'd discovered something in the financials. Something illegal. Something Logan thought no one would ever find. I read the email twice, then picked up my phone and made a call that would change everything. The call I made that night wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no threats, just a quiet, firm conversation with someone who had been watching Logan longer than I had. Her name was Michelle Torres. We'd met years ago at a fintech conference in Austin, back when I was still building prototypes in garages, and she was auditing mid-tier investment firms for a regional SEC branch. We'd kept in touch off and on since. Not close friends, but mutual respect. She liked how I played the long game. I liked how she never blinked when men twice her size tried to intimidate her in boardrooms. And now she was senior counsel for financial investigations at the federal level. Michelle, I said, my voice calm, I have something for you. I didn't send everything at once. That would have been messy. Instead, I packaged it clean, tight, undeniable. Years of emails, draft contracts, altered spreadsheets. Logan's firm had been inflating user metrics for at least 2 of their portfolio companies, padding their pitch decks with data that didn't exist. And more recently, they'd quietly funneled investor capital into a shell company tied to one of Logan's cousins in Panama. The kicker. They used my infrastructure to do it. Or rather, they tried to because they thought I wasn't watching. But I was. I'd built in safeguards from the beginning, mirror logs, redundant permissions. And when Logan's CTO tried to override access to a particular revenue dashboard 2 weeks ago, I flagged it, tracked it, let it run just long enough to map the pattern, and then I copied everything. Michelle didn't say much when I sent the files, just replied, understood, this is sufficient, you may be contacted, stay available. 3 days later, Logan's office was raided. It didn't make national news, not right away. But within our world, the tight competitive circuit of VCs, founders, and legal sharks, it was a nuclear blast. People started jumping ship. 2 analysts fled within 24 hours. Another associate lawyer leaked a whistleblower letter to 3 different firms. Word spread that someone had sabotaged the deal, but no one could pin it on me. Logan didn't even have time to panic properly. He was too busy trying to lawyer up before the house of cards collapsed completely. And I kept smiling. The next part was petty, but I won't apologize for it. 2 weeks before Ivy's wedding, I got a text from Mom. Hey, honey, can you talk? I ignored it. Then another. Your sister's really upset. I think she wants to apologize. That one made me pause, but I still didn't reply. Instead, I sent Rachel a note. Block off my calendar for the wedding weekend. I'll be out of the country. She replied in less than 5 minutes. Done. I'll confirm your hotel in Geneva. Not long after I got an email from Ivy. Not a text, not a call, an email. Chase, I know I messed up. I've been thinking a lot about what you said about letting people speak for you, about not standing up for you when I should have. Logan's not who I thought. He was, and I wish I had realized that sooner. If you're willing, I'd like you to come to the wedding. I'll seat you at my table. I'll make a toast in your honor. I miss my brother. Ivy. I didn't answer right away, not out of cruelty, just clarity, because for the first time I could see her clearly. She wasn't the villain, not fully. She was just a mirror reflecting what the family always believed, that I was lesser until I proved otherwise. That my quiet life meant I was falling behind, that success only counted if it was photogenic. And now that the glossy version of her future was falling apart, she wanted to remember who I was. I didn't need that anymore, but I did need closure. So I sent one line. Thanks for the note. I hope the wedding goes well. And I didn't attend. I flew to Geneva, spent 3 days at a leadership summit hosted by a partner firm I had just acquired a 42% stake in. Then I hiked a mountain trail with 2 friends who didn't care what I wore or what car I drove. We talked about legacy, about what it meant to build things that lasted. Not businesses, relationships, trust, self-worth. The morning of the wedding, I got a final text from Ivy. You really didn't come. I didn't respond because by then she didn't need my answer. She already had it. 3 months later, Logan was indicted. Wire fraud, securities violations, misrepresentation of investor funds. The building he leased evicted. The deal with Vitek canceled. Peter pulled out completely and reallocated his investment into my firm. And Ivy. She filed for annulment, didn't even make it past the honeymoon. I never gloated, never posted a quote about karma, never sent a told you so email. But I did one thing. I made a quiet donation to the legal clinic where Michelle got her start in Logan's name, tax-deductible, non-refundable. And as for my family, they started reaching out again. Polite emails, holiday invites, the occasional, let's catch up sometime. But I didn't go back. I didn't need to. Because revenge. It wasn't the explosion. It was the silence afterward, the power shift, the understanding that the brother they ignored had become the man they couldn't reach even if they tried. And that more than anything was the moment I won. But the story didn't end there. Because one day, Ivy showed up at my office. No appointment, no warning. She came in without a word. No receptionist, no warning text, no assistant calling ahead. Just appeared. My office is on the 34th floor, and I have 3 layers of security between the elevator and my desk, but somehow Ivy got through. Rachel later told me she looked so pale and lost that no one had the heart to stop her. She stood there for a long moment, framed in the glass doorway, looking small in a beige coat too light for the season. I was on a call with a partner from London negotiating a merger clause. I held up one finger to signal, give me a second. But Ivy didn't wait. She walked in, sat down across from me, and stared out the window as if the skyline would offer her a better explanation than I could. By the time I ended the call, she hadn't moved. Her voice was barely a whisper. I didn't know where else to go. I said nothing, just looked at her calmly. Not cruel, not cold, just tired. She swallowed hard. It's over. Everything's over. I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew, but I let her speak because maybe that's what she needed, someone who wouldn't interrupt her version of the fall. After the annulment, she said, Logan turned vicious, said I embarrassed him, said I ruined everything, but he was already spiraling. The indictment, his investors, everyone pulled out. He tried to spin it, but no one bought it. And now, she stopped, laughing bitterly. Now he's living at his cousin's house in Connecticut and blaming me for losing his empire. I didn't correct her. He never had an empire. He was borrowing mine. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, thick, worn at the edges. My name was scribbled on the tab. I found this in one of Logan's storage boxes, she said. He was keeping files on you, trying to figure out what you were worth, who you knew, how he could get around your firm's ownership. It's obsessive. I took the folder, flipped through the first few pages. Printouts of corporate filings, blurry screenshots of my private Slack messages, even an NDA draft with forged signatures. She looked ashamed. I didn't know he was doing this. Did you want to know? I asked. Her eyes filled with tears. No, I nodded. There it was, the real answer. She could have asked questions, could have looked deeper, could have stopped being a passive passenger in her own story, but she didn't because it was easier not to. I was so proud of him, she said quietly. Everyone was. The way he carried himself, the things he said, and I thought if I just became part of that world, I'd finally be respected. I'd finally matter. I leaned back in my chair, looking at her not as the sister who had betrayed me, but as the girl I once helped build a science fair project for because she was too nervous to present it alone, the one who used to curl up next to me during thunderstorms because she believed I could scare away lightning. You mattered before Logan, I said. You just stopped believing it. She wiped her eyes, took a shaky breath. I miss you, Chase. I didn't respond because sometimes silence is the most honest answer. I'm not here to ask for anything, she added quickly. I just wanted you to know, I see it now what I did, how I let them treat you, how I treated you, and I'll never forgive myself for that. I stood, walked to the window, looked down at the city pulsing below us, people scurrying to meetings trying to matter. Ivy, I said, you don't have to spend your life apologizing. Just don't forget again. She nodded slowly, then stood. I'll go. She turned, walked to the door, then hesitated. I hope someday you'll come back. Not for them, for me. She left before I could answer, and I sat there for a long time after. The fallout came in waves. Logan's firm officially dissolved 4 months after the raid. 2 senior partners were fined and barred from managing investment funds for a decade. Logan himself pled down to avoid jail, but the plea agreement crippled him professionally. No one would touch him, not in tech, not in finance, not even in the consultant circuits. His name became a cautionary tale. Ivy moved back into the city quietly. She got a job at a nonprofit. No announcements, no social media posts, just disappeared from the spotlight she once chased so desperately. We didn't talk often, but when we did, it was real honest, no more pretending. Mom and Dad, they started trying again too. Emails, birthday cards, a holiday dinner invite. I politely declined, but I didn't feel bitterness anymore. I felt distance. Not the painful kind, the healthy kind, the kind you need to breathe, the kind that reminds you that you survived something and built something better. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of a building I owned, the same building Logan once tried to pitch investors, from the same building where I learned just how powerful silence could be. Rachel handed me a glass of wine. Everyone's downstairs, she said. Should I tell them you're on your way? I looked down at the gullible lot tech founders, partners, clients, friends, people who saw me for who I was, not who I used to be. No, I said, let them enjoy the party. I'll come down when I'm ready. She smiled. You always do. As she left, I turned toward the skyline. Lights blinking, taxis humming, the city breathing. I thought of everything it took to get here, the humiliation, the betrayal, the silence, and the rise. Then I pulled my phone from my pocket, opened my camera, snapped a photo of the view, and typed one sentence into the caption. They laughed at the hoodie. Now I own the roof.